In the heart of the 14th century, the world was a place of chaos and confusion. Imagine a time where kings and popes fought for control, cities were torn apart by rival factions, and ordinary people lived in constant fear. This was the world of Gian Galeazzo Visconti, a man who was both a genius and a nightmare. He was the Duke of Milan, a city that was the center of power in northern Italy. Gian Galeazzo was known for his cunning, his wealth, and his relentless pursuit of power. He was a master of realpolitik, a term that means using any means necessary to achieve political goals. His ambition knew no bounds, and he was willing to do whatever it took to expand his influence. Gian Galeazzo's grasp extended far beyond Milan. He had already taken control of Verona, Padua, Mantua, and Ferrara. These cities were like stepping stones on his path to greater power. He even had his eyes set on Tuscany and the Papal States, regions that were vital to the political and religious landscape of Italy. Some believed he was aiming to create a kingdom of Lombardy, or even a united Italy. Others thought he was simply playing the game, for the sake of power itself. No one knew for sure what his ultimate goal was, but everyone knew he was a force to be reckoned with. In the complex world of Italian politics, Gian Galeazzo had to navigate a treacherous path. One of the biggest challenges he faced was the Great Schism, a time when the Catholic Church was divided between two popes. There was the Roman Pope, who was supported by most of Italy, and the Avignon Pope, who was backed by France. Gian Galeazzo's subjects in Milan were loyal to the Roman Pope, but he himself had strong ties to France. This put him in a difficult position, as he had to balance the interests of his people with his own political ambitions. One of Gian Galeazzo's most ambitious schemes involved France. He proposed that France should resume its pursuit of the Kingdom of Adria, a region that included parts of modern-day Italy and the Balkans. He suggested that his son-in-law, Louis of Orléans, should be the beneficiary of this new kingdom. This plan was part of a larger strategy to expand French influence in Italy and to strengthen his own position. Gian Galeazzo sent his ablest diplomat, Niccolo Spinelli, to Paris to argue for this idea. Spinelli, a man in his 70s, was one of the most skilled diplomats of his time. He argued that the Papal States had only brought hatred and violence to the Church, and that it would be better for everyone if the Pope renounced his temporal power. France was interested in the idea, but they wanted the Pope to officially bestow the Kingdom of Adria on Louis before they committed to a military campaign. The Pope, however, was hesitant. He wanted to have the Papal States firmly under his control before giving them away. This led to a complex negotiation involving the Duke of Coucy, one of the most respected and persuasive men in France. Coucy, along with the Bishop of Noyon and the King's secretary, Jean de Sains, was sent to Avignon to convince the Pope to make the commitment. They argued that only France could end the schism, and that Louis of Orléans was the best person to lead the campaign. The Pope, however, was reluctant, fearing he would be seen as the liquidator of the papal heritage. The negotiations continued, but they were complicated by the political turmoil in France. The king, Charles VI, was suffering from periods of madness, which intensified the struggle between the Duke of Burgundy and the Duke of Orléans. This internal conflict weakened France's ability to move forward with the plan. Meanwhile, the English, who were already at war with France, warned that they would break the truce if France took up arms against the Roman Pope. This added another layer of complexity to the situation. In response, the French government took steps to prepare for a potential conflict. They ordered the strengthening of defenses and the repair of crumbling walls. They also issued an ordinance banning games like tennis, soles a form of field hockey, and dice, hoping to encourage practice in archery and the crossbow. This was an attempt to improve the French military, which had struggled in recent battles against the English. However, the ordinance was short-lived. The nobles, fearing that the common people would become too effective with weapons, insisted that the ban on games be revoked. As the situation in France became more unstable, the pressure against the Voie de Fait, the way of force, increased. The Florentines sent a delegation to Paris to argue against a French alliance with Gian Galeazzo. They found an ally in the Duke of Burgundy, who was not keen on helping Louis of Orléans become King of Adria. The Duke of Burgundy also found an unlikely ally in Queen Isabeau, who despised Gian Galeazzo but shared his goal of preventing Louis from gaining more power. The strongest opposition to the Voie de Fait came from the University of Paris, a center of intellectual and clerical power. The university had long been critical of the Avignon papacy, which they saw as corrupt and materialistic. The Faculty of Theology, led by figures like Jean Gerson and Pierre Daly, began to advocate for the way of cession, which called for both popes to mutually abdicate. Gerson, in particular, argued that retaining authority in a way that harmed the common good was a mortal sin. This was a bold statement that challenged the authority of both popes and their supporters. The university organized a popular referendum to gauge public opinion on how to resolve the schism. The results were clear. The majority of people supported mutual abdication or arbitration by a selected group. A general council of the church was considered the least desirable option, as it was feared that it would simply divide into factions and perpetuate the schism. Despite the growing pressure, Louis of Orléans received a new opportunity. He was offered the sovereignty of Genoa, a city that was in the midst of a civil war. Gian Galeazzo, who saw Genoa as a strategic port for Milan, likely influenced this offer. For Louis, this was a significant step toward achieving his goals in Italy. He immediately sent Coucy and his team back to Avignon to negotiate the enfeoffment of Adria. This time, they asked for a delay of 3 to 4 years before launching the campaign, giving Louis time to secure his position in Genoa. The negotiations were long and difficult. The cardinals demanded specific commitments regarding money, troops, and signed agreements from the King of France and his brother. After months of delays and excuses, the French envoys finally obtained the document of enfeoffment. However, just 2 weeks later, Pope Clement VII died, leaving the future of the Voie de Fait uncertain. The death of Clement VII marked a turning point in the struggle to end the schism. The University of Paris, which had been working tirelessly to find a solution, saw an opportunity. They organized a formal audience with the king, where they presented their findings and argued for the way of cession. The rector of the university, Nicolas de Claminges, delivered a passionate and eloquent speech that criticized the popes for their mismanagement and corruption. He called for immediate action to end the schism and restore the church to its former glory. The speech was a powerful moment, one that resonated with many people who were tired of the chaos and division. It was a call to action, a plea for the king to take a leading role in resolving the crisis. The university's arguments were compelling, and they gained support from influential figures like the Duke of Burgundy. However, the popes and their supporters were not willing to give up their power without a fight. The debate over a general council continued, with theologians on both sides discussing its legitimacy and authority. In the end, the Voie de Fait was not the solution to the schism. Instead, the idea of a general council gained momentum. This council would eventually lead to the Council of Constance in 1414, which would finally end the schism and elect a new pope. The road to this outcome was long and difficult, filled with political maneuvering, religious debates, and personal struggles. But it was a necessary step in the process of healing the wounds that had torn the church apart. The story of Gian Galeazzo and the Voie de Fait is a reminder of the complexity and chaos of the 14th century. It is a tale of ambition, power, and the struggle to find a way forward in a world that seemed to be falling apart. It is a story that still resonates today, as we continue to grapple with the challenges of leadership, morality, and the search for unity in a divided world.